You hate the big guy. After Neagley's final scene in Season 3, I'm even more convinced Reacher is a hypocrite. Please don't tell Alan Ritchson I said this, but I think one scene in Reacher Season 3 proves that Jack Reacher is a hypocrite. As someone who binged the first 2 seasons of the show right before the release of Reacher Season 3, I experienced a lot of Jack Reacher in a very short amount of time, and let me say that he is definitely a very fascinating character. It's no wonder that there are 29 Jack Reacher novels, as the titular character consistently finds himself wrapped up in complex criminal conspiracies. After successfully defeating Xavier Quinn and Polly, the 2 most formidable villains in the entire series, Neagley claims that she has finally realized why Reacher does what he does. Reacher and Neagley have worked together countless times in the past, so her not being able to fully figure him out confirms what a complex character he is. However, at the end of the season, Neagley claims that Reacher doesn't get himself involved in dangerous situations because he loves the little guy, but because he hates the big guy. Read her full quote from the Reacher Season 3 finale below. Neagley, it's not just because you need to put things right, and it's not because you love the little guy. It's because you hate the big guy. You hate the big, powerful, smug sons of bitches who think they can just get away with things. Reacher Season 3, Episode 8. While Reacher seems to agree with her comment, it proves that he is a hypocrite since Neagley's description of the big guy basically describes him. Reacher is big, powerful, smug, and consistently thinks he can get away with anything he wants. Throughout the entire series, Reacher believes he can override the authority of law enforcement officers and do things his own way. Since he views himself as the most capable person in any given situation, he always takes matters into his own hands and hardly considers the repercussions. Reacher's motivation confirms he's more of an anti-hero than an outright hero. The fact that Neagley's description of the big guy aligns so well with Reacher's main characteristics proves that he is actually an anti-hero. Even though Reacher is not as bad as villains like Xavier Quinn and Polly, he consistently breaks the law and disobeys authority figures. However, Reacher always believes his roguelike actions are justified because he is trying to save people's lives. It is undeniable that Reacher does save a lot of lives and is overall a very good person. However, him going undercover in Season 3 proves that his qualities also fit in perfectly with the bad guys if he needs them to. Therefore, while he has been portrayed as more of a traditional hero in the past, Reacher Season 3 proves that Jack Reacher is actually an anti-hero. For a man who lives by an unbreakable personal code, Jack Reacher sure makes a habit of breaking it, and nowhere is this more painfully clear than in Reacher Season 3's final moments with Frances Neagley. Her goodbye wasn't just poignant, it was piercing. As the camera lingered on her face, equal parts admiration and heartbreak, Reacher once again did what he always does, walked away. But this time, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like hypocrisy wrapped in stoicism. Let's rewind. From the beginning of Season 3, Reacher made it very clear he was on a mission. This wasn't about personal grudges, old friendships, or emotional closure. He wanted the truth, the target, and a tactical path forward. And he got it, with Neagley's help, of course. But what stings is how much she gave versus what he was willing to return. Reacher preaches fairness, loyalty, and moral clarity. Yet when Neagley, his most steadfast ally, needed even a fraction of that same clarity from him, he chose silence. And then the line came, "You hate the big guy." Delivered not as a dig, but as an insight, it encapsulated the entire emotional hypocrisy that Reacher has carried through 3 seasons. Neagley wasn't accusing him of being cruel. She was identifying the bitter irony. The man who fights for justice can't give any to himself, or to those who love him. Reacher's code versus Reacher's heart. At face value, Reacher is a fortress of principle. He doesn't kill unless he has to, though his "has to" is a bit looser than most. He protects the vulnerable. He doesn't tolerate bullies. He lives without possessions, attachments, or apologies. But let's be honest, he does form attachments. Season 1 showed it with Roscoe. Season 2 doubled down with Russo. And Season 3? It made it blatantly clear with Neagley. The woman's been at his side through hell and high command, and while she tries to keep it professional, the emotional subtext has always been bubbling just below the surface. So when Reacher watches Neagley walk away, knowing she wants more, knowing he wants more, but refuses to acknowledge it, he's not upholding his code. He's hiding behind it. Because here's the thing, Reacher doesn't hate the big guy out in the world. He hates himself. Or at least the parts of himself that feel, love, regret. And because he can't reconcile those emotions with his ruthless efficiency, he denies them altogether. Neagley deserved better. Neagley isn't just another ex-military buddy. She's the only recurring character who sees Reacher not as a weapon, but as a man. She's the rare person who doesn't flinch at his silence, who calls out his blind spots, and who's still there when the smoke clears. So watching her in that final scene, forcing a smile as she realizes again that Reacher is choosing the road over the relationship, was brutal. She wasn't asking for a confession. She wasn't even asking him to stay. She was hoping for recognition. A simple moment where he'd say, "Yeah, this matters too." But Reacher, the so-called moral compass, couldn't offer that. Not because he didn't feel it, his eyes said everything, but because admitting it would mean admitting that he needs someone. And Reacher doesn't do need. Or so he tells himself. Which is why that makes him a hypocrite. He's not emotionless. He's avoidant. A key part of Reacher's mythos is that he's this unemotional, hyperlogical drifter with fists like anvils and nerves of steel. But that's just the branding. The truth is far more complicated. You don't go out of your way to avenge Russo unless you care. You don't follow clues into deadly ambushes to protect old unit members unless they mean something. And you definitely don't bring Neagley into your orbit again and again unless you trust her more than you're willing to say. So why the double standard? If Neagley acted the way Reacher does, cold, distant, emotionally unavailable, he'd call her out in a second. In fact, he has. In prior seasons, Reacher has pushed Neagley to confront her fear of physical touch, her trauma, her hesitation. He's the first to challenge others to be better, stronger, braver. But when the tables are turned, when someone like Neagley gently nudges him to acknowledge the human cost of his choices, he walks away. And in doing so, he becomes the very kind of person he claims to despise, the kind who refuses growth. The tragedy behind the stoicism, Reacher's refusal to give Neagley even the smallest emotional closure, isn't just frustrating, it's tragic. Because the audience can see what he won't admit. He does care. Maybe even deeply. But somewhere along the line, maybe after his last command, maybe after too many losses, he decided that connection was weakness. But here's the truth that Neagley embodies. Connection is the thing that saves us. She's stayed in touch. She's built a life, even if it's built around shadows. She chooses people, even when they're difficult. Reacher, meanwhile, chooses principle. And while that makes him righteous in the field, it makes him empty in the quiet. That final moment when Neagley walks away and Reacher stays behind, stoic as ever, was more damning than any villain's monologue. It was the show screaming, this is what he's afraid of. Not bullets. Not betrayal. Intimacy. You hate the big guy. It was a perfect line. Maybe the best of the entire season. Because Neagley wasn't just talking about Reacher's discomfort with power. She was way, but in the quieter, more dangerous way. The way that,